Welcome back to the Sailrite workbench. Today we're going to be making the Sailrite leather glasses case kit. Here's everything that's included in that kit, and here are some common tools and supplies that you'll need for this project. I'll go over every step of the process to make sure your glasses case comes out perfectly. And if you don't have your kit already, I'll leave that linked in the description below. And having a pattern for a project like this with a lot of abnormal shapes is really helpful, and the leather that we include in this kit is my absolute favorite. It's our pre-dyed veg tan that comes in black, chocolate, brown, tan, and natural. It's gorgeous stuff and I love working with it. And we give you a 12 by 24 inch panel so that you get 2 tries at making it if you accidentally mess up one, or if you get it right the first time, you can make 2 of them. So without any further ado, grab your kit and let's get into the project. But before we cut into any leather, I'm actually gonna make a template out of our pattern, which just takes a couple minutes. It's really easy. All it takes is some poster board or any sort of cardboard. You could even use an old cereal box and a glue stick. So I will roughly cut out all the pieces within ½ an inch or so, but not to that actual final dimension. And then we'll glue it to the poster board and then cut it out to the final size at that point. And making a template with the poster board like this is definitely optional. You could just use the pattern as is by taping it to your leather and cutting directly from that. And now that everything is glued, I'll cut out all of these shapes and then we'll have a rigid template that we can use over and over again. And make sure you cut the slits where the magnetic fastener will go, and also the holes where the rivets will go. We got ourselves a template. And now we can grab our leather and start transferring the template onto the leather. Oh yeah, you could get 3. And we just ran a little science experiment, and at first I thought you could only get 2 sunglasses cases out of this, but if you really budget your leather and you're smart, you might be able to get 3 out of it. But without a doubt, you can get 2. All right, so now we need to use a Scratch Awl or a pen or something to transfer the shape from our template to the leather. So I like to hold it in place with a weight and just go around it. And now that it's nice and rigid from the poster board, it's easy to mark. And before I move it, I'm also going to mark where the holes will go and the slits for the fasteners. Then just repeat those steps for the center support piece and the strap. And then you'll see here, 2x, that means we need 2 of these pieces because we're gonna cut them out and glue them together. And I like using a Scratch Awl instead of a pen just so I don't have to worry about ink getting on my leather. And they're only a few bucks, and I think you'll find yourself using it on just about every project. So definitely a good investment if you don't have one already. And now to cut out all of these pieces, I'm gonna be using a lot of our precision knife, but our new folding utility knife would also do a great job. And right here I'm cutting with our precision knife, which is kind of a better version of an X-Acto or a craft knife. And the reason I like this so much is the blade doesn't bend like it does with those other knives, so I feel like I'm in more control when I'm using it. And I'll do the other half with the folding utility knife because it's also great for this purpose. And this style of knife is actually the knife that I learned on and have used for years, and it always stays in my tool rotation. I'm honestly not great at sharpening blades, but with these, you just pop in a new blade and you can always have a sharp edge. Now with the pieces cut out, we need to punch out the holes and cut the slits. And to do that, we'll use the included 1/8 inch hole cutter and then use the same utility knife or knife to cut out these slits. It's important to be careful because it is easy to overdo it and cut too far. I actually like to start with a little starting hole and ending hole and try not to overcut past those little holes. And don't try to do it all at one time. Flip it over and just be careful. And now we'll set the body and the strap pieces aside, and I'll grab the 2 center support pieces. And the reason there's 2 of them is we're actually going to glue it together so it doubles the thickness and doubles the strength of it so that this piece has some nice rigidity. And you could use any glue for this, but I'm going to be using our S18 contact cement. And now with those glued, we'll give that about 10 minutes for the glue to set, and then we'll tack them together. Now that these are tacky, place them right on top of each other. Now that that is glued, the next step is going to be to use the included Sailrite sanding stick, and we're going to use this to sand over all of those rounded edges to make sure everything is perfectly smooth. And sanding all the edges nice and smooth like this once we bevel and burnish it, is really just going to make the final product look a lot nicer and cover up any mistakes that we made while cutting. And sometimes when you sand it, it can kind of create almost a little mushroom effect of that leather wanting to fold back over, but don't worry about that. We're going to take care of that here in a moment when we use our edge beveler. This is the edge beveler that comes in the kit. It's the #1 Sailrite edge beveler. It's our smallest size since this is just one layer of 4 to 5 ounce leather. And we're definitely going to bevel all of these edges. On the strap, we're just going to bevel the top edges and not worry about the bottom since it's getting glued down. And you can bevel the center support piece. It is on the inside of the case, pretty much invisible. So up to you if you want to bevel these. And as you're using the tool, just start off at about a 45-degree angle and keep a consistent angle throughout the whole pass so that you don't go deeper on one part than another. And what beveling does is it is knocking off that corner so that once we burnish it, it'll be nice and rounded with no sharp edges. And now that I've done this piece, I did the top half, and I think I'm going to leave the back half as is because it looks nice already, and it's just one piece of leather, so no need to take off more material since it's already on the thin side. So now I'll bevel the other ones the exact same way, keeping the same angle so that everything looks uniform across all the pieces. And if you do decide to bevel the center support piece, since it is thicker, go ahead and do the top and bottom side. And now we're going to grab just our strap piece and we're going to do a quick burnish on these edges since we're about to glue this to the body piece and we won't be able to burnish it once it's glued on there. So we'll grab some water. Typically I would use something like gum tragacanth or toconol, which are burnishing gums, which really make the process a lot easier, quicker, but you can just use as simple as water and cotton canvas or even some denim. Does a great job as well. On the tool side of things, you usually use a burnisher like this, but like I said, canvas works great, or you could even get by using the handle of the beveler that we give you. So a few options. So just dampen that edge with a sponge or a rag. Doesn't take much, no need to overdo it. And then grab our burnisher, just create some friction. And if you're using the beveler to burnish the edges, it works the exact same way. You're just creating friction with that wooden handle. And this one does have a slight curve to the handle, which does help. It's not quite as easy to use as the burnishing tool, but it'll get the job done. And when I burnish with canvas or denim, I actually like to set the piece down and then hit it from kind of a similar angle like we did with our beveler, but this time with the canvas instead of the beveler, and just really smooth out that top edge. Do a little bit on the back side too. And once we've burnished the edges, it'll look a lot more smooth. All those fibers will be laying down and it'll have a nice little sheen to it. And even though this is already looking pretty nice, I'm using a little bit of gum trag here just to boost that sheen a little bit. So with just a little bit of gum trag on top of what we already did, it boosts the shine a little bit, like I said, and that's looking awesome. And again, beveling and burnishing this piece is definitely optional since it is pretty much hidden. But since I have the stuff out, I'll go ahead and do it really quickly. Next step is to install our magnetic fasteners on both the body and the strap pieces. So bringing back our pattern here, you'll see female fastener right there, and that is this one. And we also need a washer for it. And then on the body, it takes the male fastener, which looks like this, and it gets a washer as well. And you might first need to go in from the other side to kind of forge the way and make those holes a little bit more visible on the back side. But once you've located them, insert it through those slits and then push this down, making sure it's very flush with the back side of the leather. And then we need to place the washer on. And now to lock it into place, we need to fold over these tabs right here. And typically I fold them on top of each other in the middle, but to keep a low profile, I'm actually gonna fold these out to keep the whole thing as thin as possible. I'm just using the edge of my mallet here to get it started. And then I'll tap those flat. And then same thing for the strap piece, except this one goes on the front side of the leather and out the back. And then same exact thing with the washer. Now with our hardware installed, it's time to glue the strap piece to the body piece. And there's a couple of things to do before we apply any glue, and that is to make some guidelines using our template. And I also want to add a stitching line here so that I have something to follow when I'm stitching it over on the machine. So bringing our pattern back out, what we're doing is transferring this dotted line onto our leather. So the way I like to do that is just to cut tiny slits on the inside part of that line at both the top and the bottom of it. Position the pattern on the leather piece and then put my awl right in that crease I just made to give me a guideline. And the reason I made these lines just barely on the inside of the guideline is so that they're invisible, covered up by the strap once I put it on top. To glue the two together, I'm going to use contact cement again, the same S18, and there's a couple ways to do it. If you have a really steady hand, you could just run a streak right up the middle and then put glue on the strap piece. But to be extra careful, I usually use a little bit of masking tape, and I connect those two guidelines with the masking tape so that I protect the areas that I don't want glue on and leave open the areas that I do want glue on. And I'm going just barely past that line because obviously I don't want any glue leaking out onto the edges. And that makes applying the glue much easier. And the glue's not going to stick to the metal real well, but I definitely want to make sure I get the other side of that fastener. And I'll pull the tape away, and I've got a nice sharp line. We'll give that a couple minutes to dry and then put the two pieces together and start sewing. So as I place this down, I've got my eye on those guidelines on either side of the piece and do my best to fall right on top of those. And if you get it glued down and there's a little bit of an overhang and things aren't quite sitting flush, feel free to grab the sanding stick again or the beveler again and just smooth that out as needed. Now that that's stuck on there well, I'll get my wing dividers, or you could use a Scratch Awl for this, and give myself a stitching guideline. And with that done, now we're ready to sew. So as I start to sew, I'm going to drop my needle right here by that rivet hole. That's going to be the bottom of the case and the least visible part on the glasses case. So I'll hide my start and end point right there. Hold my threads as I get started and just follow that stitch line as closely as I can. Then as I'm coming up on that pivot point, I will raise the presser foot, make any slight adjustments until my needle is just barely over that perfect spot. Drop the presser foot and set the needle. Then again, you'll see here I'm about ½ millimeter off from landing in that old hole where I started. So with my presser foot up, I can position that needle right above where it needs to go before I drop it again and complete that stitch. So whether it's around a pivot or at the start or end of a seam, that's a really good trick to make things look a lot nicer. Right here is where I did that long stitch, and right there is where I started. Then of course I use the Sailrite thread burner before taking it back to the workbench. And our next step is... And now that this is all sewn up, it's time to install our center support piece with the included rivets. And what this piece does is it will go right here and create an arch, which gives the nose of the glasses something to rest on. But also, once we put this together and fold it over, it takes the brunt of the force from this closure point rather than the glasses themselves. So really important piece, and so let's get it installed. So we just need 2 rivets for this, but if you're not familiar with setting rivets, you get 100 pack of these guys, so feel free to test it out on some scrap. So insert the post through the back side, then place the cap on top of it. Then we'll grab the anvil and place the domed side up and set that underneath the rivet. And then with some light taps, get it most of the way there, and then a couple big ones to really set it in place. And that looks great on the front and the back, so now we'll just do that again on the other side. The center support piece might feel pretty stiff at this point, which is a good thing. We want that structure. But if you need a little help bending it into that arch shape to fit your glasses, you can dampen it with some water to make it more pliable while creating that shape. The next step is to fold this front flap over and glue the side seam together before we sew. And so you'll just find where it comes to a point and start your fold there. And then I will take a pen or something and just mark where that glue needs to stop. Same thing on the other side. So now we'll glue everything from this tip to the line we just made. And contact cement is important for this step so that when we fold it over, it'll stay there and let us sew it, and we won't have to worry about clips since it stays together once it comes together. I'll let that get tacky for a few minutes, and with the glue alone, it'll hold it together, and then we can go sew it. I'll fold it over, again using that line that we made for the glue. Keep the edges as flush as I can. And that contact cement is keeping everything together. Now we can go over to the sewing machine and officially close this case up. And you know me, I always like to give myself a stitch line. And for something like this, that's a pretty high visibility area, I even like to mark my beginning and end points with a Scratch Awl. And I have a really defined spot to aim for just to make sure that things are consistent on both sides and evenly spaced. So I'll slowly bring down my needle right into that little hole I created with my Scratch Awl and get started. I'm gonna do 2 back stitches here. And now we'll rotate it and do the other side, but this time I'm starting from the bottom, so that way my presser foot can be on the left side on top of the material. And once you've sewn the side seam, if there's anything that's not quite smooth or flush, you can always bring back your sanding stick and get everything looking perfect before we burnish, which is the last step. And I'm actually gonna do one side with gum trag and the other side with water. Right here I'm using gum trag. This is my preferred method. I use this just about on every project, but you can definitely get by just using water if you don't happen to have gum trag with you. It's just gonna take a little bit more time, but here in a second, you'll see the final results so we can compare and contrast the two, and I'll kind of share some thoughts after that. And this is the side I did with just water and the piece of canvas. And it took a little bit more elbow grease. I took about 3 to 4 passes on it, but I was able to get a good burnish. But over here, this is a side with the gum trag, and with just 1 or 2 quick passes, you get the same great look with less effort. And this is gonna hold up a little bit better over time as well. We're gonna burnish the remaining raw edges, and then we're all done. And then all that's left is to remove this little plastic protective film, and then we've got ourselves a glasses case. And again, you can make a couple cases out of this kit. So here I am making a second one. This time I'm using the fabricator machine. And to switch it up a little bit and show some of the variety you can get from this kit, I'm using a size 16 twist point needle and a Tech 70 thread in a different color, which is a little bit of a finer stitch, just to give you a little bit of a different look and show you that you can really make this kit whatever you want it to be. And that completes this project. With our kit and a few common tools, you can have a glasses case to be proud of, and you'll learn some essential leatherworking skills along the way. And if you've made it this far in the video and you don't already have your kit, I'm gonna leave that linked in the description below, so go pick one up. And if you already have some of these tools that are included in the kit, you can of course buy the leather and the pattern a la carte at Sailrite.com. And there's enough leather in this kit to actually make 3 of these. So I made these 2, and I still have some leftover leather, enough for a 3rd one. So you can make 1 for yourself and then 2 for some friends. Or if you mess up on the first try, you've got 3 shots at it. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you have a great time making your kit. And if you're working along with me throughout this whole video, I hope your project turned out great. Subscribe to the channel to stay up to date on all of our projects, products, and kits, and I'll see you in the next video.